My name is Sam Mitchell. I'm 38 years old, and I've been running the Double M Ranch in the Arizona Territory for the past 15 years. It's 1885, and life out here is hard, unforgiving, and lonely. I've always preferred the company of my cattle and horses to most people, especially after what happened to my family during the Apache Wars. But on September 12, 1885, everything changed when I witnessed something that would alter the course of my life forever: an Apache girl who refused to bow to anyone, no matter the consequences. The morning started like any other. I was riding my stallion Thunder, checking the northern pastures, when I heard shouting coming from the direction of the town of Cedar Ridge, about 3 miles from my ranch. The voices were angry, hostile, and carried the kind of venom that made my blood run cold. I'd heard that tone before. It was the sound of a mob looking for trouble. Against my better judgment, I spurred Thunder toward the commotion. As we crested the hill overlooking the town's main street, I saw a crowd of about 30 townspeople gathered in a circle. In the center of that circle stood a young Apache girl, maybe 16 or 17 years old, with long black hair braided with leather strips and wearing traditional Apache Aiyana buckskin dress decorated with intricate beadwork and turquoise stones. What struck me immediately wasn't just her beauty, though she was undeniably beautiful. It was her posture. While the crowd jeered and shouted at her, she stood perfectly straight, her chin raised, her dark eyes blazing with defiance. She wasn't cowering or pleading. She was facing them down with the kind of courage I'd rarely seen in grown men. "Bow down, you savage," shouted Mayor Hutchins, a fat, pompous man who'd never worked an honest day in his life. "Show some respect to your betters." The girl's response was to lift her chin even higher. When she spoke, her English was perfect, though accented with the musical cadence of her native tongue. "I bow to no one except the Great Spirit and my ancestors. You are not my betters." The crowd erupted in angry shouts. Someone threw a clod of dirt at her feet, but she didn't flinch. Another man, Tom Bradley, the town's self-appointed sheriff, stepped forward with a whip in his hand. "Maybe this will teach you some manners," he snarled, raising the whip. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't just sit there and watch them brutalize a young woman, Apache or not. I spurred Thunder down the hill and rode straight into the crowd, scattering people as I went. "That's enough," I shouted, positioning Thunder between the girl and Bradley. "What's going on here?" "None of your business." "Mitchell," Bradley spat. "This savage was caught stealing from Morrison's store. She needs to learn her place." I looked down at the girl. She met my gaze without fear, and I saw something in her eyes that reminded me of a wild Mustang, proud, untamed, and unbroken. "Did you steal from Morrison's store?" I asked her directly. "I took bread for my sick grandmother," she replied, her voice steady. "I left Pimenta silver bracelet that was worth 10 times the cost of the bread, but they say Apache silver is worthless." I looked at Morrison, a thin, greedy man who ran the general store. "Is that true? Did she leave payment?" Morrison's face reddened. "It's Indian jewelry. Probably stolen anyway." "So she did pay," I said, my voice getting harder. "She overpaid, in fact. So what's the real problem here?" "The problem," Mayor Hutchins interjected, "is that she won't show proper respect. She won't bow and apologize for being in our town." I looked back at the girl. "What's your name?" "Aiyana," she said. "It means eternal blossom in my language." "Well, Aiyana, it seems these fine citizens want you to bow to them. Are you going to do it?" She looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to read my intentions. Then she shook her head. "I will not bow to those who have no honor. I will not apologize for existing." The crowd roared with outrage, but I held up my hand for silence. "Then you won't bow," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "and neither will I." To everyone's shock, including my own, I dismounted Thunder and walked over to stand beside Aiyana. "If you want her to bow, you'll have to make me bow first, and I guarantee you, that's not going to happen." The crowd fell silent. Sam Mitchell might have been a loner, but I was also known as a man you didn't cross. I was 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, and I'd fought in the Apache Wars before settling down to ranching. More importantly, I was one of the few men in the territory who wasn't afraid of a fight. "You're making a mistake, Mitchell," Bradley warned, his hand moving to his gun. "This doesn't concern you. It concerns me now," I replied, my own hand resting on the butt of my Colt .45. "This girl paid for what she took. She's done nothing wrong except refuse to grovel to a bunch of bullies." "She's Apache," someone shouted from the crowd. "They're all murderers and thieves." "Some are," I admitted, "just like some white men are murderers and thieves. But this girl isn't. She's just trying to take care of her grandmother." Aiyana looked at me with surprise. I could see she hadn't expected anyone, especially a white rancher, to stand up for her. "Why?" she asked quietly, so only I could hear. "Because it's the right thing to do," I replied, "and because I know what it's like to be judged for things you didn't do." The standoff continued for several tense minutes. Bradley's hand kept twitching toward his gun, but he knew that drawing on me would be suicide. I had a reputation as one of the fastest draws in the territory, earned during my time as a cavalry scout. Finally, Mayor Hutchins stepped forward. "Fine, Mitchell. You want to protect this savage? That's your business. But she's not welcome in our town? If we see her here again, there'll be consequences. The only consequence, I said, will be that you'll have to deal with me, and I promise you, that's not something you want. I turned to Aiyana. Come on, I'll give you a ride home. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I helped her up onto Thunder behind me, and we rode out of town with the angry murmurs of the crowd following us. We rode in silence for about a mile before she spoke. Why did you help me? I told you because it was the right thing to do. That is not the whole truth, she said. I can hear it in your voice. There's more. She was right. Of course, there was more. My wife and daughter were killed 3 years ago, I said, the words coming out harder than I'd intended. Not by Apaches, by white men who thought they could take what they wanted from a woman alone on a ranch. When I found them, she'd been hurt bad before they killed her. And little Emma, ... I couldn't finish. I am sorry, Aiyana said softly. That is a great loss. The point is, I continued, I know what it's like when people judge you based on what others of your kind have done. After Sarah and Emma died, everyone expected me to hate all white men, to become a killer myself. But I didn't. I judged each person by their own actions, not by the color of their skin or the sins of their people. That is wisdom, she said. But it is rare wisdom among your people. It's rare among all people, I replied. Apache, white, Mexican doesn't matter. Most folks are too lazy to think for themselves. We rode for another hour through the desert landscape, past towering saguaro cacti and red rock formations that looked like ancient castles. Finally, we reached a small canyon where smoke was rising from a hidden camp. This is where I live, Aiyana said, sliding down from Thunder. With my grandmother and a few others who have nowhere else to go. I looked around the camp. It was well hidden and defensible, but I could see it was also temporary. These people were living like refugees in their own land. How many of you are there? I asked. 12. All that remain of our band. The soldiers took the rest to the reservation at San Carlos. I knew about San Carlos. It was a hellhole where the government had crammed thousands of Apache from different tribes together, with barely enough food and water to survive. Many called it a slow death sentence. Why didn't you go with them? Because my grandmother is too old and sick to travel. And because she hesitated, then looked at me with those fierce dark eyes. Because I refused to live in a cage. Even if it means dying free. An old woman emerged from one of the Wikiup's traditional Apache dwellings, made of brush and hide. She was tiny and bent with age, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She spoke rapidly in Apache to Aiyana, who responded in the same language. My grandmother wants to know why you helped me, Aiyana translated. Tell her what I told you, because it was the right thing to do. Aiyana translated, and the old woman studied me for a long moment. Then she spoke again, and Aiyana's eyes widened. What did she say? She says you have the heart of a warrior, but the soul of a peacemaker. She says the spirits told her that a white man would come who would stand with us in our darkest hour. She thinks you might be that man. I felt uncomfortable with the mystical talk, but I could see the hope in Aiyana's eyes. I don't know about spirits, I said, but I know that what happened in town today was wrong. And I know that if they come after you again, they'll have to go through me first. The old woman spoke again, and this time Aiyana smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her. She says you are welcome in our camp any time, she says. She says you are family now. I felt something stir in my chest that I hadn't felt since Sarah and Emma died, a sense of belonging, of purpose. Tell her I'm honored, I said as I prepared to leave. Aiyana walked with me to where Thunder was waiting. Sam Mitchell, she said, using my name for the first time. What you did today, ... It will not be forgotten, but it will also not be forgiven by the people in town. You have made enemies. I've had enemies before, I said, mounting Thunder. The question is, what are you going to do now? You can't keep living like this, hiding in the desert. Eventually, they'll find you. I know, she said, but I will not bow. I will not go to the reservation. I will not give up who I am. Then we'll have to find another way, I said, because I meant what I said back there. If you're going to make a stand, you won't be making it alone. As I rode back toward my ranch, I couldn't get Aiyana out of my mind. Her courage, her dignity, her refusal to be broken, it reminded me of everything I'd lost when Sarah and Emma died. But more than that, it reminded me of everything I'd forgotten about myself. I'd been living like a dead man for 3 years. Going through the motions of life without really living. But today, standing up for that brave Apache girl, I'd felt alive again. I'd felt like the man I used to be, the man Sarah had fallen in love with. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? 3 days after the confrontation in Cedar Ridge, I was awakened before dawn by the sound of gunfire echoing across the desert. It was coming from the direction of Aiyana's camp, and my blood ran cold. I'd been expecting this. The townspeople weren't going to let the humiliation of being faced down by an Apache girl and a savage-loving rancher go unanswered. I threw on my clothes, grabbed my rifle and gun belt, and saddled Thunder in record time. As I rode hard toward the hidden canyon, the gunfire intensified, punctuated by shouts and screams. By the time I reached the rim of the canyon, the attack was in full swing. Below me, I could see about 20 men from town, led by Tom Bradley. Surrounding the Apache camp, they had the high ground on 3 sides, and the Apache were trapped like animals in a barrel. I could see muzzle flashes from the wiki-ups as the Apache returned fire, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. I didn't hesitate. I spurred thunder down the treacherous canyon path, my rifle ready. As I reached the canyon floor, I saw Aiyana crouched behind a boulder, firing an old Springfield rifle at the attackers. Her grandmother lay beside her, blood seeping from a wound in her shoulder. "Aiyana," I shouted as I dismounted. "How many are hurt?" "3 dead, 5 wounded," she called back, not taking her eyes off the enemy. They came at first light. No warning, no demands for surrender. They just started shooting. I could see the rage in her eyes, but also the desperation. The Apache were fighting bravely, but they were running low on ammunition, and more townspeople were arriving every few minutes. "We need to get you out of here," I said, crawling over to where she crouched. "I will not run," she said fiercely. "This is our home. We will not be driven from it like animals." "This isn't your home," I said bluntly. "This is a death trap. Your grandmother is wounded, your people are dying, and more men are coming. If you stay here, you'll all be dead by noon." She looked at me with those fierce dark eyes, and I could see the war raging inside her, her pride fighting against her practical knowledge that I was right. "Where would we go?" she asked. "The reservation?" "No," I said. "My ranch. It's defensible, and it's legally mine. They can't just attack it without cause. They will say we are your prisoners, that you are holding us for the authorities. Let them say what they want. The important thing is keeping you alive." A bullet whined off the rock near our heads, and I heard Bradley's voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Mitchell, we know you're down there. Come out with your hands up, and we might let you live." I stood up, exposing myself to their fire, and shouted back, "The only thing I'm coming out with is my rifle, Bradley, and I'm going to use it to put a hole in anyone who doesn't. Get off this land right now. This isn't your land, Mitchell. It's not yours either. These people aren't bothering anyone. They're just trying to survive. They're savages. They need to be on the reservation where they belong." I looked down at Aiyana, who was listening to every word. "What's it going to be?" I asked her. "Fight and die here, or live to fight another day." She closed her eyes for a moment, and I could see the pain it caused her to make this decision. When she opened them, there were tears, but her voice was steady. "We will come with you, but not as prisoners, as allies." "Agreed," I said. "Now let's get your people ready to move." The next hour was the longest of my life. Under cover of return fire from the Apache warriors, we managed to get the wounded loaded onto travoy makeshift stretchers made from poles and hides. Aiyana's grandmother, whose name I learned was Nolnish, was unconscious but still breathing. The plan was simple, but dangerous. I would lead the group out through a narrow passage at the back of the canyon that I'd discovered during my scouting days. It was treacherous and would be slow going with the wounded, but it would bring us out behind the attacker's position. Once we're clear of the canyon, I told the Apache warriors, we'll have about a 2-hour head start before they realize we're gone. My ranch is 15 miles from here. We can make it if we push hard. Aiyana translated for those who didn't speak English, and I saw nods of understanding. These were warriors. They knew the risks. The escape was harrowing. The narrow passage was barely wide enough for the travoy, and we had to move in single file. Every sound seemed amplified. Every loose rock that clattered down the cliff face made us freeze and listen for signs that we'd been discovered. But we made it. As we emerged from the hidden passage onto the desert floor, I could still hear gunfire echoing from the canyon. Bradley and his men were still shooting at shadows, not realizing their quarry had escaped. The journey to my ranch tested everyone's endurance. The wounded Apache bore their pain in stoic silence, while the warriors took turns helping to pull the travoy across the rough terrain. Aiyana walked beside her grandmother's travoy, holding the old woman's hand and speaking to her in their native language. "What are you telling her?" I asked during one of our brief rest stops. "I am telling her about you," Aiyana replied, "about how you stood with us when no one else would. She is very weak, but she smiles when I speak of your courage." "I'm not courageous," I said. "I'm just doing what's right." "That is what courage is," she said simply. "Doing what is right when it would be easier to do nothing." We reached the Double M Ranch just as the sun was setting. My ranch house was a sturdy adobe structure with thick walls and small windows built to withstand both the elements and hostile attacks. The barn and outbuildings were similarly constructed, and the whole compound was surrounded by a low stone wall. I helped get the wounded into the house, while the other Apache set up a defensive perimeter. Aiyana and I worked together to tend to her grandmother's wound, cleaning it and applying bandages I'd gotten from the town doctor months earlier. "She has lost much blood," Aiyana said, her voice tight with worry, "but she is strong. She will survive." As if summoned by her words, the old woman's eyes fluttered open. She looked around the room, taking in the adobe walls and wooden furniture, then focused on me. She spoke in Apache, her voice weak but clear. "She says thank you," Aiyana translated. "She says you have given us life when we were facing death. Tell her she's welcome," I said. "Tell her this is her home now, for as long as she needs it." Aiyana translated, and the old woman smiled. She reached out with a trembling hand and touched my arm, speaking again. she says ... She says you are no longer alone. She says the spirits have brought us together for a purpose. I felt that stirring in my chest again, that sense of belonging I'd experienced at their camp. What purpose? Before Aiyana could answer, one of the Apache warriors came running into the house. He spoke rapidly in their language, and I saw Aiyana's face go pale. What is it? I asked. Riders coming, she said. Many riders. They will be here soon. I grabbed my rifle and headed for the door. How many? Joaquin says at least 30. Maybe. More, I cursed under my breath. Bradley had gathered a small army. Can your people fight? The wounded cannot, but the 6 who are uninjured are all warriors. They will fight. 6 warriors, plus me, against 30 or more. I calculated quickly. We can hold them off from the house, but not indefinitely. Then, we will make our stand here, Aiyana said, checking her rifle. We will not run again, Aiyana. No, she said firmly. You stood with us in town. You helped us escape the canyon. You brought us to your home. Now we stand with you. I looked at this remarkable young woman, barely 17 years old, but with the heart of a warrior and the soul of a leader. In that moment, I realized that something had changed between us. We were no longer just a white rancher and an Apache girl thrown together by circumstances. We were partners, allies bound together by shared danger and mutual respect. All right, I said. We make our stand here, but we do it smart. The house is built like a fortress, thick walls, small windows, good fields of fire. We can hold them off until what? She asked. No one is coming to help us. The territorial authorities will side with the townspeople. The army will say we are harboring hostile Indians. She was right, of course. We were on our own. But as I looked around at the Apache warriors preparing for battle, and at Aiyana standing beside me with her rifle ready, I realized I didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, I was fighting for something that mattered, not just survival, but justice, honor, and the right of people to live free from persecution. The riders appeared on the horizon. Just as the last light was fading from the sky, they came in a long line, spread out across the desert, their torches flickering like angry stars. As they drew closer, I could see Bradley at their head, along with Mayor Hutchins and most of the prominent men from Cedar Ridge. They stopped about 100 yards from the ranch house, just outside rifle range. Bradley rode forward alone, carrying a white flag. Mitchell, he called out. We know you've got those savages in there. Send them out and we'll let you live. I stepped out onto the porch, my rifle cradled in my arms. They're not savages, Bradley. They're people, and they're under my protection. You're harboring hostile Indians. That's a federal crime. They're not hostile, they're refugees, and this is my land. You have no authority here. We have the authority of righteous citizens. Mayor Hutchins shouted from behind Bradley. Those savages attacked our town. That's a lie, I shouted back. You attacked them. I was there. I saw what happened. You're a savage lover, Mitchell. Someone else yelled. You're a traitor to your own kind. I felt Aiyana step up beside me on the porch. She was holding her rifle, and her presence was like a declaration of war. I am Aiyana, of the Chiricahua Apache, she called out, her voice carrying clearly across the desert. I have done nothing wrong except refuse to bow to bullies and cowards. If you want to take me, come and try. The crowd of riders erupted in angry shouts, but Bradley held up his hand for silence. Last chance, Mitchell. Send out the Indians, or we'll come in and get them. I looked at Aiyana, and she looked at me. In that moment, we both knew what was coming. This was at the moment when we would either stand together or fall together. Then come ahead, I called out. But know this, every one of you that sets foot on my land will answer to me. And I promise you, some of you won't be going home tonight. Bradley wheeled his horse around and rode back to the group. I could see them talking animatedly, gesturing toward the house. Then they began to spread out, surrounding the ranch compound. They're going to try to take us from all sides, I said to Aiyana. Can your warriors handle the barn and outbuildings? Yes. But Sam, she paused, and I realized it was the first time she'd used my first name. If we do not survive this night, I want you to know what you have done. Standing with us, it means everything. You have shown us that not all white men are our enemies. And you've shown me that not all Apache are mine, I replied. Whatever happens tonight, I'm proud to stand with you. She smiled then, and despite the danger we were facing, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not just for survival, but for something more. A future where people like us could stand together. Where courage and honor mattered more than the color of your skin. The attack began at midnight. They came from 3 sides at once, hoping to overwhelm us with numbers. But they'd underestimated both the defensive strength of my ranch and the fighting ability of the Apache warriors. The battle raged for hours. The Apache fought with a skill and ferocity that amazed me, while I used every trick I'd learned during my cavalry days. We held them off, but just barely. By dawn, we were running low on ammunition, and I could see that several of the attackers had managed to get close to the house. That's when everything changed. As the sun rose over the desert, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, we heard the sound of approaching horses. But these weren't more attackers, these were cavalry. A full troop of U.S. soldiers riding hard toward the ranch. The townspeople scattered like quail. abandoning their attack and fleeing back toward Cedar Ridge. Bradley tried to maintain some semblance of authority, but when the cavalry captain dismounted and approached the house, it was clear that the siege was over. "Captain James Morrison, 4th Cavalry," the officer introduced himself. "Are you Samuel Mitchell?" "I am," I replied, stepping down from the porch. "What brings you here, Captain?" "We received word that there was an illegal attack on a private ranch. The territorial governor sent us to investigate." I looked at him in surprise. "Who sent word?" "A telegraph operator in Tucson. Apparently, someone got word to him about what was happening here." I felt Aiyana step up beside me. "That was my doing," she said quietly. "I sent my youngest warrior Kia to Tucson yesterday. He is fast, and he knows the desert paths." I hoped someone in authority might listen. I stared at her in amazement. Even in the midst of preparing for battle, she'd been thinking ahead, planning for contingencies. This young woman was not just brave, she was brilliant. Captain Morrison looked at Aiyana with interest. "You must be the Apache woman I've heard about. The one who refused to bow to the townspeople." "I am," she said, lifting her chin with that familiar defiance. Well, the captain said, "I have to say, I admire your courage. And Mr. Mitchell, I admire yours as well. It takes a brave man to stand up for what's right, even when it's not popular." As the cavalry took statements and began the process of sorting out what had happened, I realized that something fundamental had changed. Not just in my life, but in the relationship between Aiyana and me. We had faced death together, fought side by side, and emerged not just as survivors, but as something more. We were partners now, in every sense of the word. And as I looked at this remarkable young woman who had refused to bow to anyone, I knew that my life would never be the same. 6 months after the siege at my ranch, I stood on the porch of my house watching Aiyana work with a young Apache boy, teaching him to read from one of my old books. The sight filled me with a contentment I hadn't felt since before Sarah and Emma died. The Double M Ranch had become something I'd never imagined: a sanctuary, a school, and a bridge between two worlds. The aftermath of that night had been complicated. Captain Morrison's investigation had cleared us of any wrongdoing, but it had also attracted attention from territorial authorities, newspaper reporters, and curious visitors from as far away as California. Some came to gawk at the savage-loving rancher and his Apache princess, but others came with genuine interest in what we were trying to build. Aiyana's grandmother, Nolnish, had recovered from her wound and become the unofficial matriarch of our growing community. The other Apache from the canyon had stayed, along with several more who had heard about our sanctuary, and decided to join us rather than face the reservation. We now had 23 Apache living on the ranch, along with 3 Mexican families, who had been driven from their homes by bandits, and even to white families whose farms had been destroyed by drought. "Sam," Aiyana called out, breaking me from my reverie, "could you help us with this word? Little Hawk is having trouble with it." I walked over to where they sat under the shade of a large cottonwood tree I'd planted years ago. The boy, who couldn't have been more than 8 years old, was staring intently at a page in one of my old school. "What's the word?" I asked, crouching down beside them. "Perseverance," Little Hawk said, pronouncing it carefully. "Aiyana says it means to keep trying, even when things are hard." "That's exactly right," I said, ruffling his hair. "And you're showing perseverance right now by working so hard to learn to read." The boy beamed with pride, and I felt that familiar warmth in my chest. Over the past months, I'd become something of a father figure to many of the Apache children, teaching them English and arithmetic while they taught me about their culture, their language, and their way of seeing the world. "Sam," Aiyana said, standing up and brushing dust from her dress, a simple blue cotton dress that she'd taken to wearing instead of her traditional Apache clothing when dealing with white visitors. "The delegation from the territorial capital will be here soon. Are you ready?" I nodded, though I felt nervous. Today was important, perhaps the most important day since the siege. A group of officials from the territorial government was coming to evaluate our experiment, as they called it. Their decision could determine whether we'd be allowed to continue our work or whether the Apache would be forced to relocate to the reservation. "How do I look?" I asked, straightening my best shirt and vest. Aiyana smiled, and my heart skipped a beat the way it always did when she looked at me like that. Over the months, our relationship had deepened from mutual respect to something much more profound. We hadn't spoken of it directly. There were too many complications, too many barriers between our worlds, but I could feel it in the way she looked at me, in the way she stood close to me when we talked, in the way she'd sometimes touch my hand when she thought no one was looking. "You look like a man who's about to change the world," she said softly. "We're about to change the world," I corrected. "This isn't just my fight anymore." She nodded, and I saw the same mixture of hope and fear in her eyes that I felt in my own heart. We'd worked so hard to build something beautiful here, something that proved people of different races and cultures could live together in peace and prosperity. But we both knew how fragile it all was, how easily it could be destroyed by the prejudices and fears of those who didn't understand what we were trying to accomplish. The delegation arrived at noon, a group of 5 men in dark suits riding in a fancy carriage escorted by a small cavalry unit. I recognized the territorial governor, William Morrison, no relation to Captain Morrison, with the Territorial Attorney General, a representative from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and 2 other officials whose names I didn't catch. "Mr. Mitchell," Governor Morrison said as he stepped down from the carriage, "I must say, your ranch looks quite prosperous." "Thank you, Governor," I replied, shaking his hand. "We've worked hard to build something special here." "Yes, so I've heard. The reports have been ... interesting. You're harboring fugitive Indians, I'm told." "I'm providing sanctuary to people who were being persecuted," I corrected. "There's a difference." The governor's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't argue. "Well, shall we have a look around? I'm curious to see this experiment of yours." The next 2 hours, I led the delegation on a tour of the ranch. I showed them the school where Aiyana and I taught Apache children to read and write in English, while Apache elders taught white and Mexican children about traditional crafts and survival skills. I showed them the workshops where Apache artisans created beautiful jewelry and pottery that we sold in markets as far away as San Francisco, providing income for the entire community. I showed them the fields where Apache, Mexican, and white families worked side by side, growing crops using a combination of traditional Apache knowledge about desert farming and modern agricultural techniques. I showed them the clinic where Nolnish, who had been trained as a medicine woman, worked alongside Dr. Sarah Chen, a Chinese-American physician who had come to the ranch after being driven out of her previous practice by anti-Chinese sentiment. "This is all very impressive," the Bureau of Indian Affairs representative said, "but I have to ask, are these Apache truly free, or are they essentially your prisoners?" Before I could answer, Aiyana stepped forward. Over the months, she'd become our unofficial spokesperson, the bridge between the Apache community and the outside world. "We are free," she said clearly. "Free to leave whenever we choose, free to practice our religion, free to speak our language, free to raise our children as we see fit. But we are also free to learn new ways, to adapt, to build a future that honors both our past and our hopes for tomorrow." "And what about you personally, Miss?" the Attorney General asked. "Aiyana Nolnish," she replied, using both her given name and her grandmother's name, as was Apache custom. "I am free to make my own choices about my life, my future, my relationships." The way she said that last word, with a quick glance at me, made my heart race. I wondered if the officials caught the implication. "I see," the governor said thoughtfully. "And Mr. Mitchell, what's your role in all this? Are you some sort of Indian agent?" "I'm a rancher," I said simply. "This is my land, legally purchased and properly registered. I've chosen to share it with people who needed a home. In return, they've made it more prosperous and more beautiful than it ever was when I lived here alone. But surely you must see the complications," the Attorney General said. "The mixing of races, the blurring of traditional boundaries. Many people find this sort of thing disturbing." "Many people find a lot of things disturbing," I replied. "That doesn't make those things wrong." The governor was quiet for a long moment, looking around at the bustling activity of the ranch. Children of different races played together in the yard. Adults of various backgrounds worked side by side in the fields and workshops. It was a scene of harmony that was rare in the Arizona Territory of 1886. "Mr. Mitchell," he said finally, "I'll be frank with you. There are people in the territorial government who want to shut this place down. They say you're setting a dangerous precedent, encouraging Indians to resist reservation life, promoting race mixing." My heart sank, but I kept my expression neutral. "And what do you say, Governor?" "I say," he paused, looking around again, "I say that what you've built here is remarkable. I say that if more people could see what I'm seeing today, we might have fewer problems with Indian relations in this territory." I felt a surge of hope, but I tried not to show it. "Does that mean ... It means that as long as you continue to operate within the law, as long as there are no incidents of violence or lawlessness, the territorial government will not interfere with your ... experiment." I wanted to cheer, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Thank you, Governor. You won't regret this decision." "I hope not," he said, "but I want to be clear, you're walking a tightrope here. One mistake, one incident that gives your enemies ammunition, and I won't be able to protect you." "Understood," I said. As the delegation prepared to leave, the governor pulled me aside. "Mr. Mitchell, may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "That young Apache woman, Aiyana, there seems to be an understanding between you two." I felt my face flush. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I think you do, and I think you need to be very careful. A white man and an Indian woman. That's the kind of thing that could destroy everything you've built. Here, with respect, Governor, my personal relationships are my own business. In an ideal world, yes, but we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a world where people are killed for crossing racial lines, where communities are destroyed by prejudice and fear. I'm not saying it's right time, saying it's reality." I looked across the yard to where Aiyana was saying goodbye to the other officials, and I felt a fierce protectiveness rise in my chest. "Governor, I've lost one family to hatred and violence. I won't lose another." He studied my face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I hope you won't have to. But be careful, Mr. Mitchell. Be very careful. That evening, after the delegation had left and the ranch had settled into its usual peaceful routine, Aiyana and I walked together to the top of a hill overlooking the valley. It was our favorite spot, a place where we could talk privately without being overheard. "They're going to let us stay," I said, still hardly believing it. "For now," she replied. "But you heard what the governor said. We're walking a tightrope. Aren't you afraid?" She was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the valley where the lights of our community twinkled like stars. "I'm afraid of losing this," she said finally. "I'm afraid of losing the children's laughter, the elders' stories, the hope in people's eyes when they realize they can build a better life here." And I prompted, sensing there was more. "And I'm afraid of losing you," she said softly. My heart stopped. We'd been dancing around our feelings for months, but this was the first time either of us had spoken so directly. "Aiyana," I said, turning to face her, "you're not going to lose me. Whatever happens, whatever we have to face, we'll face it together. Will we?" she asked, and I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Sam, I know what people say about us. I know what they think. When they see us together, a white rancher and an Apache woman, it's scandalous. It's dangerous. It's love," I said, finally speaking the word that had been in my heart for months. "I love you, Aiyana. I love your courage, your intelligence, your refusal to bow to anyone. I love the way you care for the children, the way you honor your grandmother, the way you've made this place a home instead of just a ranch." Tears glistened in her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "But love isn't always enough, is it? Your first wife, you loved her, and she was still taken from you. Sarah was taken by evil men doing evil things," I said. "But she wasn't taken by love. Love didn't kill her, hate did. And I won't let hate win again." The governor was right though. If we, if we become more than friends, more than partners, it could destroy everything we've built. Or it could make it stronger. Said Aiyana. "What we've built here isn't just a ranch or a school or a community. It's proof that people can choose love over hate, understanding over prejudice, hope over fear. If we're going to ask others to make that choice, shouldn't we be willing to make it ourselves?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the war raging in her heart, the same war that had been raging in mine for months. Love versus practicality, hope versus fear, the future versus the past. "The Apache have a saying," she said finally. "The heart that loves is always young. My grandmother told me that when I was a little girl, and I never understood what it meant. But I think I do now. What does it mean? It means that love gives us the courage to start over, to build something new, to believe in possibilities that others can't see." She took my hand, and I felt the warmth of her touch spread through my entire body. "It means that maybe, just maybe, we can prove that love is stronger than hate." "Does that mean?" "It means yes," she said, smiling through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stand with you whatever comes. Yes, I'll help you prove that the heart that loves is always young." I pulled her into my arms and kissed her, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt since Sarah and Emma died: complete happiness. Not just contentment or satisfaction, but pure, overwhelming joy. As we stood there on the hill, holding each other under the stars, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. It had started with a young Apache woman who refused to bow to bullies, and a lonely rancher who chose to stand with her. It had continued through violence and danger, through doubt and fear, through the slow building of trust and understanding. And now it was becoming something new, a love story that would scandalize some and inspire others. A partnership that would face challenges we couldn't even imagine. A future that would be built on the foundation of two people who had chosen to believe that love was stronger than hate. "What happens now?" Aiyana asked, her head resting against my chest. "Now we build," I said. "We build a life together, a family together, a future together. We show the world that an Apache woman and a white man can love each other, respect each other, and create something beautiful together. It won't be easy. The best things never are," I replied. "But we've already proven that we can face anything. Together, we've already shown that we won't bow to hatred or prejudice or fear." She lifted her head and looked at me with those fierce, beautiful eyes that had captivated me from the first moment I saw her. "Then let's show them what love can do," she said. And as we walked back down the hill toward our home, toward our community, toward our future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them the same way we had faced everything else together, standing tall, refusing to bow to anyone or anything except the love that had brought us together and the hope that would carry us forward. The Apache girl had refused to bow, and the lonely rancher had stood with her. Now they would build something new together, something that would prove that love, courage, and determination could overcome any obstacle, bridge any divide, and create miracles in the most unlikely places. Our story was just beginning.